The whip cracked across the boy's back for the 10th time. He was 14. His torn deerskin shirt hung in wet strips. Blood trailed down his spine and dripped onto the dust. His knees buckled, but the rope around the post held him upright. Each breath he took was a low, shaking thing. He did not scream. He had stopped screaming an hour ago. Every man on that boardwalk watched. Not one moved. Not one spoke. Then, from the far end of the street, a single rifle shot shattered the silence. That was the moment the stranger rode into Durango. Subscribe and stay with me, and let me know in the comments, where are you watching this from? To understand what led to this, we have to go back. Back to the day before any of this began. The sun was still climbing when Curtis Harlan's men dragged the boy into the square. They tied him to the whipping post in front of the general store. The rope bit into his wrists. He was barefoot. His dark hair hung over his eyes. He looked at no one. The post was old, splintered, dark with weather and old stains. It stood in the middle of Main Street like a permanent warning. Everyone in Durango knew what it meant. Curtis Harlan stood a few feet away. His thumbs were hooked in his gun belt. He had a broad chest and a neck like a tree stump. His teeth were brown from tobacco. He never seemed to blink. Deputy Cal Pierce stood on the boardwalk behind him. The badge on his chest caught the morning light. He had a shotgun cradled across his arms. He was not there to stop the whipping. He was there to make sure no one else did. Harlan waited until enough people had gathered. Men came out of the saloon and stood on the porch. A woman paused in the doorway of the dry goods store. The blacksmith stopped his hammer. A few children slipped away into the alleys. Then Harlan raised his voice. "This here's an Apache." He let the word hang. "His name is Taza, son of some chief called Victorio. Maybe you've heard of him." A murmur moved through the crowd. Chief Victorio's name was known. His band had raided settlements to the south. There had been blood on both sides. But here in Durango, there had been no trouble for a year. Harlan pointed at the boy. "I caught him scouting our town, watching our homes, sending signals to his people." The boy did not lift his head. "He knows where the war parties are camped. He knows when they plan to hit us." Harlan slowly turned to face the crowd. "But if we make an example of him, right here, right now, his father will come for blood. And when he does, we'll have the cavalry waiting." A few men nodded. Others looked at the ground. Deputy Pierce spat tobacco juice into the dust, but said nothing. The woman from the dry goods store stepped back and closed the door. Harlan nodded to a man holding a leather whip. It was coiled, dark at the tip from older use. The man was heavy, with a face that showed no feeling at all. "Start," Harlan said. The first lash made the boy's body jerk. The crowd flinched. A sound like a muffled gasp went through them. But no one moved to stop it. The second lash opened the skin. The boy's shoulders quivered. His breath came in sharp huffs. He pressed his forehead against the rough wood of the post. The third lash. The fourth. By the fifth, the boy's legs gave out. He hung entirely from the rope. The whip came down anyway. An old man near the saloon looked away. A younger one next to him put a hand over his mouth. The blacksmith turned and walked back into his forge. You could hear the fire hiss, then nothing. No one went for the sheriff. The sheriff had not been seen in the street for 2 days. Everyone knew why. Harlan walked a slow half-circle around the post. He studied the boy like he was examining livestock. He reached out and lifted the boy's chin with one thick finger. "Your father hears this, boy. Every lash, every cry. Tell me where the camp is and I'll make it stop." The boy's eyes were dark and swollen. He said nothing. His lips moved, but no sound came. Maybe it was a prayer. Maybe it was defiance. Harlan dropped his hand and nodded to the heavy man. "Keep going." The whip fell again. A woman across the street pulled her shutters closed. An old dog skulked under a wagon and lay down with its tail between its legs. Deputy Pierce shifted his weight. He looked up the street and down the street, then back at the whipping. His face was blank. By noon, the square had mostly emptied. The men who could not stomach it had drifted away into the saloon or their shops. Those that stayed were Harlan's men, leaning against the hitching posts, passing a bottle. The boy's back was a raw mess. Blood soaked the waist of his torn trousers. He had stopped making sound altogether. His chest rose and fell in short, shallow bursts. Harlan stepped closer to him. His spurs scraped the dirt. "You'll hang before this is over," he said. Not loud, just for the boy. "Unless your father gives me what I want." He turned and walked toward the saloon. His spurs clicked on the boardwalk steps. The heavy man coiled the whip and followed. Deputy Pierce stayed a moment longer. He looked at the boy. Then he turned and followed the others. The street fell quiet. The sun moved slowly overhead. The boy hung there. The rope creaked. His fingers, tied behind his back, were purple and stiff. Blood dried in the dust around his bare feet. A mule tied to a rail across the street flicked its ears. A bit of tumbleweed rolled down the center of the road and stopped against a barrel. Up in the hills beyond town, a thin column of smoke rose from an Apache signal fire. The boy had built it the night before they caught him. It was still burning. No one in Durango noticed. They were too busy pretending none of it was happening. The afternoon stretched long. The sun dropped toward the rooftops. Someone lit a lantern inside the saloon. Music started, a fiddle out of tune. Laughter spilled through the bat-wing doors. The boy's head hung forward. His breathing was so light it barely moved his broken chest. A fly landed on his shoulder and walked across the open wound. He did not flinch. Out on the edge of town, a dog began to bark. Then it stopped. And from somewhere far to the east, where the road dipped below the ridgeline, came the sound of a horse, steady, slow, coming closer. The sound of the horse grew louder. The stranger came down the east road at a walk. His dark brown horse moved with a calm that nothing in that town could match. His tan hat sat low. The bright red bandana was pulled up just enough to cover his throat. The rifle was in the saddle scabbard, stock-worn smooth by years of use. He saw the boy from 50 yards out, the post, the limp body, the blood darkening the dust. He reined in his horse and sat motionless for a long moment. The whole street was quiet. A few shutters cracked open. Faces appeared and vanished. No one came out to greet him. No one shouted a warning. The town was holding its breath. A man stepped out of the dry goods store. He was thin, older, with a stained apron, and a face that had not slept well in a long time. He glanced at the stranger, then at the boy, then back at the stranger. "Mister," he whispered, "you better keep riding." The stranger dismounted without a word. He tied his horse to the nearest hitching post and began walking toward the square. His boots made a steady, even rhythm on the packed dirt. The shopkeeper hurried after him. "I mean it. You don't know what you're walking into." The stranger stopped. He turned his head just enough to fix the man with a cold, evaluating gaze. "Tell me." The shopkeeper's hands trembled. "His name is Curtis Harlan. Him and 7 men. They run this town. They own the saloon, they own the stables, and they own the law." The stranger waited. "The sheriff. He don't come out no more. Hasn't for 2 days. Not since Harlan paid him a visit. That deputy over there, Cal Pierce. He's Harlan's man now. He does what he's told." The stranger looked toward the jail. The door was shut. The windows were dark. No light inside. The shopkeeper lowered his voice even more. "That boy, he's Apache, son of some chief named Victorio. Harlan caught him sending smoke signals a few nights back. He's been whipping him ever since. Says he's going to draw the Apaches here. Then the cavalry will sweep in and kill 'em all. He wants a massacre. He wants headlines. He wants the army to think he's some kind of hero." The stranger's jaw tightened. He looked at the boy again. The boy's head was still hanging. His breathing was shallow and uneven. The rope had cut so deep into his wrists that the skin was black. A door slammed across the street. Curtis Harlan walked out of the saloon. His spurs clicked. His tobacco-stained teeth showed in a slow, ugly smile. He had a bottle in one hand and a cigar in the other. The heavy man with the whip stepped out behind him, along with 3 others. Harlan spotted the stranger and stopped. The street went colder. "Well now," Harlan said, loud enough for every hidden soul to hear. "Looks like we got a visitor." He took a long pull from the bottle and handed it off. He didn't break eye contact with the stranger. "Let me make something real clear," Harlan said. "That boy is my prisoner, and anyone who tries to interfere with what I'm doing here will end up right next to him, or worse." He pointed at the stranger with the cigar. "That means you, cowboy. Whatever you're thinking, forget it. Finish your business and ride out. This ain't your fight." The stranger did not answer. He did not flinch. He stood exactly where he was, feet planted, eyes locked on Harlan's. The deputy, Cal Pierce, shifted on the boardwalk. His hand moved toward the shotgun. The shopkeeper backed away, his face pale. He slipped inside the store and latched the door behind him. The boy at the post stirred. His head lifted, just barely. His swollen eyes found the stranger. The stranger saw. He did not speak. He did not move. But something settled into his shoulders. Something that had been there 100 times before. Darkness was coming. The buildings threw long shadows across the square. The wind picked up and sent a dry leaf scraping across the dirt. Harlan waited for an answer that never came. He laughed, low and cruel, then turned and walked back into the saloon. His men followed, one by one, until only the deputy remained outside, watching. The stranger looked at the boy one more time. Then he walked to his horse, pulled the rifle from the scabbard, and levered around into the chamber. The sound cut the evening like a promise. The echo of the rifle bolt faded down the street. Deputy Pierce shifted his weight. His hand still hovered at the shotgun. He watched the stranger like a man watching a coiled snake. The stranger did not move for a long moment. His eyes swept the saloon windows, then the rooftops, then the hills beyond the town where the sun had already dropped behind the ridge. He saw the thin line of smoke still rising from the signal fire the boy had built. It was faint now, almost gone. He lowered the rifle. He did not holster it, just let it hang at his side, one hand on the worn stock. He walked his horse toward the livery stable at the end of the street. His steps were slow, unhurried. Every man still watching from the windows noticed that. The stable hand was a boy himself, maybe 16. Thin arms, dirty face, a limp from a badly healed break. He was sweeping hay when the stranger led the horse inside. The boy froze when he saw the rifle. "Just the horse," the stranger said. His voice was low and calm. "Water and grain." The stable hand nodded fast and took the reins. His hands shook as he tied the horse to a stall post. He filled a bucket from the well and poured it into the trough. The horse drank slowly. The stranger leaned the rifle against a post and watched. "You know what's happening out there," the stranger said. It was not a question. The boy's mouth opened, then closed. He glanced toward the open stable door. No one was near, just the darkening street and the shape of the whipping post in the distance. "Harlan wants to bring the Apaches down on us," the boy whispered. "He's been saying it for weeks. He wants them to come for the boy, so the cavalry can wipe 'em all out. They got a fort half a day's ride south. He already sent a rider." The stranger's expression did not change. He reached into his vest and pulled out a strip of dried meat. He chewed slowly. "What about the sheriff?" he asked. "He's locked in his own jail. Harlan put him there 2 nights ago. Said he'd let him out when the business was done. No one's got the nerve to break him out. Not with Pierce holding the keys." The stranger finished the meat and wiped his hands on his shirt. He looked toward the stable door. The last of the light was gone. A lantern flickered on a post outside. In the square, the boy still hung from the rope. Someone had draped a dirty blanket over his shoulders, maybe out of pity, but no one had dared cut him loose. The stranger's eyes moved to the hills. The signal fire was completely dark now, but he had seen its meaning. The Apaches knew the boy was there. They would come, and when they did, Harlan's trap would spring. He understood the full picture. The gang, the bought deputy, the cavalry riding in from the south, a massacre designed to look like defense, and a 14-year-old boy used as bait. He did not leave. He pulled a worn saddle blanket from his horse and laid it over a bale of hay. He sat down with his back against the stall. He laid the rifle across his knees. The stable hand watched him with wide eyes. "You're staying," the boy said. The stranger looked at him once, then he closed his eyes, not to sleep, just to wait. Outside, the night settled over Durango. The music in the saloon got louder. Somewhere a woman laughed. The boy at the post shivered under the thin blanket, and the stranger sat in the dark stable, a man who had seen 100 towns like this. He did not mount his horse. He did not ride out. He waited for dawn. The lantern burned low. The stable hand had long since curled up on a hay pile, breathing softly. The horse stood quiet. Outside, the saloon music had died. The street was a dark, silent mouth. The stranger opened his eyes. He did not move quickly. He checked the rifle, full magazine, one in the chamber. He thumbed the hammer back to half-cock, then stood. The motion was easy, practiced. The boy stirred. "Mister?" "Stay here," the stranger said. He walked out of the stable without a backward glance. The cold hit him at once. Not bitter, just the thin, high desert cold that sharpens the edges of things. His boots made a steady rhythm on the hard dirt. He passed the blacksmith's forge, dead and dark, the dry goods store, the jail with its shutters pulled tight. He could smell the boy before he saw him. Blood and sweat and something else. A faint, sweet rot that meant the wounds were beginning to fester. The blanket someone had thrown over his shoulders was damp now. Dew had settled on everything. The boy's head lifted a fraction. His swollen eyes tried to focus. The stranger stopped beside the post. He reached out and pressed the back of his hand to the boy's cheek, burning hot. "Water," the stranger said, not to the boy, to the street. He did not shout. He did not repeat himself. No one came. Then a door creaked. The shopkeeper from earlier. He crept forward with a tin cup, hands shaking so badly the water sloshed. He handed it to the stranger, then scurried back into the shadows. The stranger tipped the cup to the boy's cracked lips. Taza swallowed, choked, swallowed again. "Who are you?" the boy whispered. His voice was barely breath. The stranger did not answer. He set the cup on the ground and straightened. Then he turned toward the saloon. The bat-wing doors were shut. A single lamp flickered inside, throwing weak orange light onto the boardwalk. Laughter, low and rough. The scrape of a chair. The stranger walked toward it. His rifle hung at his side, one hand cradling the stock. The red bandana seemed to glow in the dark. He pushed the doors open with the barrel and stepped inside. The room went still. Curtis Harlan sat at a round table in the back, a deck of cards in front of him. A bottle stood in the center. Around him 7 men, some still holding their cards, some leaning back with hands resting on their gun belts. The heavy man with the whip, the deputy, Cal Pierce, on a stool by the wall, shotgun across his knees. The bartender, a thin man with a stained rag, froze behind the counter. Harlan looked up. His smile came slow and ugly. "Well, well, the night rider." He set his cards down. "You got a name?" The stranger walked to the center of the room. He did not take a chair. He did not lean on the bar. He stood where every man could see him, and he said, "Cut him loose." The words fell flat. A log crackled in the stove. Someone in the back snickered. Harlan leaned back and spread his hands. "Is that so?" He looked at his men. "This fella thinks I'm gonna cut the Apache loose." A few of them laughed. The heavy man set his bottle down and cracked his knuckles. Harlan pointed a thick finger. "That boy is bait, you understand? Bait. His pa's out there somewhere, and when he comes screaming in with his war party, I'll have 100 cavalry troopers waiting. You want to get in the way of that?" The stranger didn't blink. "Cut him loose." Harlan's smile vanished. He shoved his chair back and stood. He was taller than the stranger, wider in the chest. The two men faced each other across 10 feet of scarred floorboards. "I'll say this once," Harlan said, low and hard. "You ain't the law. You ain't the army. You're a dusty cowboy with a red rag on his neck and a rifle that don't carry any authority in this town. Now, you walk out of here tonight, I'll pretend you just had too much sun. You stay, and you'll hang next to that boy come morning." The stranger did not move. He did not speak. He just stood there, eyes like stones. Harlan's jaw tightened. He nodded once. Chairs scraped. Boots hit the floor. The 7 men around the table rose as one, the click of gun leather, revolvers pulled from holsters. The deputy snapped the shotgun up, both barrels leveled. 7 men, 7 guns, plus the shotgun. The stranger did not raise his rifle. He held it low, one hand on the stock, the other on the barrel, angled down. His thumb rested near the hammer. His feet were planted. "You're outnumbered 10 to 1, Harlan said. "You don't draw. You don't get a shot off. You're already dead. You just ain't figured it out." The stranger's gaze moved slowly across the room. He looked at the heavy man, the man with the whip, the deputy, the bartender, who had backed into a corner and was praying under his breath. He looked at the table, the bottle, the cards. Then his eyes settled back on Harlan. "I'm not going to draw," the stranger said. Harlan snorted. "Smart." "Not yet." The word hung in the air. A man near the window shifted his weight. The hammer of the deputy's shotgun clicked to full cock. Harlan stared at the stranger. The stranger stared back. The standoff drew tighter. No one moved. Then, from somewhere out in the night, a sound cut through the quiet. It was high and thin, a single, long note. Not a scream, not a song. Something between a hawk's cry and a flute. It rose from the hills, carried on the cold wind, and died as suddenly as it came. Every man in the saloon froze. Harlan's eyes flicked toward the window. The deputy's shotgun wavered. The heavy man's knuckles went white on his gun. The stranger did not look away from Harlan, but a change came over him, the smallest shift in the shoulders, the slightest narrowing of the eyes. He knew that sound. He knew what it meant. And so did the boy outside. The high, thin sound still hung in the air when the stranger finally moved. He didn't draw. He didn't lunge. He simply uncocked the rifle with a slow, deliberate click and lowered it to his side. The men in the saloon exhaled. A few of them laughed. Nervous, ugly sounds. Harlan's eyes never left him. "Get out," Harlan said. "You come near that boy again, I'll put you down myself." The stranger turned. He walked toward the batwing doors. Deputy Pierce kept the shotgun trained on his back the whole way. Outside, the cold hit him again. The street was still. A single lantern flickered on a post near the whipping block. The boy hung there, head up now, watching. The stranger walked past him, close enough to smell the blood and the sweat and the fever. He paused for just a second. "Hang on," he said, so low only the boy could hear. Taza's swollen eyes focused. Something moved behind them. Not hope exactly, but a decision. He pulled his shoulders back, his spine straightened against the ragged wood. The stranger continued to the livery stable. The stable hand was awake, crouched by the stall, trembling. The stranger slid the door shut behind him and leaned his back against it. "Hear anything?" the stranger asked. The boy nodded. "2 of 'em came out a minute ago. They're saddling horses. I heard one say, 'The fire on the ridge.'" The stranger's gaze sharpened. He moved to the stable window, just a crack in the wood, and looked toward the dark ridge west of town. The stable hand swallowed. "They're going to light a signal fire at dawn, big one that the cavalry can see. When the Apaches come for the boy, the troopers will ride in and trap 'em." The stranger didn't answer. His eyes measured the distance to the ridge. The cavalry camp was half a day's ride south. A fire on that ridge would be visible for miles. Enough time to get there by dawn, if he left now. He checked his rifle. The stable hand watched him. "Mister, what are you going to do?" The stranger swung up onto his horse and took the reins. "Light the fire first." He nudged the horse out the back of the stable and into the night. The horse's hooves were muffled by the sandy earth as he guided it west, away from the lights of Durango. The town vanished behind him, swallowed by the dark. Ahead, the ridge stood black against a low, star-pricked sky. The cold was sharper now, biting at his knuckles. He pulled the red bandana tighter and kept riding. The signal fire was a heap of dry brush and cedar boughs, already stacked at the highest point of the ridge. Someone had prepared it, one of Harlan's men, probably. The stranger dismounted, rifle in hand, and circled the pile. No sentry. They hadn't expected anyone to come up here before dawn. He struck a match with his thumbnail. The flame wobbled, then caught the dry grass beneath the brush. The fire climbed quickly, licking upward until it was a tall orange beacon against the night. For miles, that fire would be visible. Any cavalry officer watching from the south would see it and think, "The Apaches are coming! Move now!" The stranger stepped back from the heat. He waited. Let it burn. Let them see. Then a sound reached him, not from the town, but from the darkness beyond the ridge. A low, rhythmic thudding. Hoofbeats, many of them, not close but not distant either. He turned north and squinted into the black. Nothing visible, just the drum of horses, steady like a heartbeat in the earth. He crouched and laid a hand flat on the cold ground. The vibration was faint but unmistakable. A column was moving. Cavalry from the north, not the south. That meant 2 forces, one riding up from the fort, another already patrolling. The trap was bigger than he had thought. If they converged on Durango, there would be no escape for anyone. A shadow detached itself from a cluster of rocks downhill. The stranger's hand went to his rifle, but the figure made no sudden move. It was an Apache man, lean and weathered, wearing a cloth band across his forehead. He carried no weapon that the stranger could see, only a long stick, painted with a spiral at the tip. The 2 men regarded each other in silence. Then the Apache spoke, in a low, halting English. "You light the fire." "I did," the stranger said. "You are not with the white law." "No." The Apache looked toward the flames. "The soldiers will come now. They think we attack, but we do not. We come to mourn." He paused. "Many of us, old men, women, children. The chief's son is taken. If he dies, we will wail, and the soldiers will shoot into the crying." The stranger's jaw set. He understood now. This wasn't just an ambush on warriors. It was a slaughter of families. The cavalry would ride in, see the gathered Apaches, and open fire, justifying it all as defense against a raid. Harlan got his massacre, and no one would ever ask questions. "You must go back," the stranger said. "Turn them around." The Apache shook his head. "The chief will not stop, not while his son breathes in that town, and we have no guns to fight soldiers." He gestured at the stranger's rifle. "But you do." The stranger looked down at the lever action in his hands. He'd faced worse odds. But this was a different kind of math. One man against a cavalry column and a gang. He turned and swung back into the saddle. "I'll get the boy out before dawn." The Apache scout raised his stick. "There is a path behind the stable. It climbs into the low hills. If you bring the boy there, we will wait." The stranger gave a sharp nod and spurred his horse downhill toward Durango. The fire roared behind him, already accomplishing its false purpose. He had maybe 3 hours until the first soldiers arrived. When he reached the edge of town, the sky was just beginning to gray. The street was different. He could feel it before he saw it. Lamps had been lit in every window. Figures moved in the dark. A heavy weight hung in the air. He left the horse behind the blacksmith's shop and crept forward on foot. The whipping post was empty. The boy was gone. But a new structure stood in the middle of the square. Crude, freshly built, a gallows. The stranger stopped cold. A man with a hammer was tapping the final nail into the platform. Another man was coiling a new rope over the crossbeam. Deputy Cal Pierce stood guard at the base, shotgun resting on his shoulder. His eyes swept the street with the bored vigilance of a man who knew no one in town would dare challenge him. A gathering of townsfolk stood at the far end of the boardwalk, huddled together. The shopkeeper was among them. His face was swollen, one eye dark. He held his arm stiffly against his chest. The stranger could see the cost of interference written across his body. Harlan had made an example of him. A side door opened in the saloon, and Harlan himself stepped out. He was grinning, fresh shirt, no coat, a pistol shoved into his belt. He walked to the gallows and ran a hand along the new wood. "Good work, boys. By sunup, this place will be famous." He raised his voice to the watching crowd. "Listen up. I gave you all a chance to behave, but some of you decided to help that stranger. Give him water. Whisper behind my back." He pointed at the bruised shopkeeper. "This man got off light. Next time, someone hangs alongside the Apache." No one answered. The wind stirred a bit of straw across the street. The stranger slipped into the stable through the rear entrance. The stable hand was there, white-faced and shaking. "They're gonna hang him," the boy whispered. "At dawn. They put the gallows up 2 hours ago. I thought you were dead." "Where is the boy?" the stranger asked. "In the jail. They chained him to the wall. Deputy Pierce is the only one with a key to the cell and the chains." The stranger moved to the small window that faced the hills. Through the cracks he could see the faint outline of the ridge, and below it a cluster of dark boulders. Movement, a glint of something. The Apache scout was already there, watching, waiting. He turned back to the stable hand. "You know the path behind here? The one that climbs into the hills?" The boy nodded. "At dawn, when you hear gunfire, you'll take that path. There will be Apaches waiting. Tell them the boy is coming." The stable hand's eyes went wide. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. The stranger faced the gallows through the stable door. The hammering had stopped. The rope hung still. The sky was lightening fast. He had promised to light the fire first. Now he had to keep the rest. And the cost of interference was clear. If he failed, the boy died, the families died, and this town would never wash the blood from its soil. The sky over Durango turned the color of a fresh bruise. The stranger stood motionless at the stable door. His rifle was cradled low, his thumb resting on the hammer. He could hear the gallows creak in the cold wind. The rope swung in a slow half-circle. A door slammed somewhere, then boots on wood. Curtis Harlan's voice boomed across the square. "Bring him out." The jail door grated open. 2 of Harlan's men emerged, dragging the boy between them. Taza's bare feet scraped the dirt. His head lolled forward. The chains still rattled at his wrists. Blood had dried in dark rivers down his back. The crowd on the boardwalk stirred. A woman covered her mouth. The bruised shopkeeper stood rigid, one hand gripping a porch rail. No one spoke. The only sound was the drag of the boy's feet and the whisper of the rope. Harlan stood on the gallows platform. He was wearing a clean black coat now. He looked almost official. Deputy Pierce climbed the steps beside him, shotgun in hand, face pale but determined. The heavy man with the whip waited below, a revolver already drawn. They forced the boy up the steps. Taza stumbled and fell to his knees. One of the men yanked him upright. His swollen eyes opened for a moment, and they found something across the square. A shadow, a red bandana. The stranger. The boy's cracked lips moved. No sound came, but his back straightened. The stranger stepped out of the dark mouth of the stable. His spurs made no sound. He walked into the middle of the street, rifle up but not aimed, and raised his eyes to the hills behind the town. He fired a single shot straight into the air. The crack shattered the silence. Every head in Durango snapped toward him. For a long second, nothing happened. Then, from the ridge where the signal fire still smoldered, a streak of light climbed into the sky. A fire arrow, bright and sharp. It arched, hung for a moment, and then died behind the black peaks. The stranger lowered the rifle and kept walking. On the gallows, Harlan's face went hard. "You again!" The stranger stopped at the foot of the platform. "Cut him loose! Last chance!" Harlan laughed. It was a raw, ugly sound, too loud for the tense morning. "You think one gunshot changes anything? I got 8 men. I got the deputy. I got a rope with that boy's name on it. You got nothing." The stranger's eyes never flickered. "I gave you the chance." He moved. The first shot took the heavy man in the shoulder, the man with the whip. He spun and fell into the dirt. Before his body hit the ground, the stranger levered another round and put it through the chest of the man holding the boy's chains. The chain clattered on the wood. Harlan screamed something. His men drew. The street erupted. The stranger dropped to one knee as bullets whistled past his hat. He shot the 3rd man in the throat. The 4th man fired wildly and hit the water trough. Wood splinters flew. The stranger's next shot caught him square in the hip. He went down screaming. Deputy Pierce raised his shotgun. The stranger was faster. The rifle barrel came up and fired from the hip. The slug hit Pierce in the stomach and slammed him against the gallows post. The shotgun discharged into the sky. Now only Harlan stood. The cigar fell from his lips. His gun was out, but his hand was shaking. He looked at his dead men. He looked at the stranger, standing amid the smoke and the blood with that red bandana bright as a wound. Harlan pulled the trigger. The shot went wide. The stranger's last round took him through the heart. The big man crumpled backward off the platform. He hit the dirt with a sound like a sack of grain. The gun slid from his fingers and stopped at the stranger's boot. Silence fell. Smoke drifted up the street. A dog barked somewhere. Then the door of the dry goods store swung open and the shopkeeper stepped out. He was holding a rifle. It was old and rusted, but he held it. Behind him, 3 other men appeared, carrying whatever weapons they had, a pitchfork, a hatchet, a cracked shotgun. They walked into the street and stood there, looking at the bodies, then at the stranger. The stranger was already climbing the gallows steps. He reached the boy. He pulled a knife from his belt and cut the chains. The boy collapsed against him. The stranger caught him with one arm. He looked down at the crowd, the townsfolk, the shopkeeper, the men with their crude weapons. He said nothing. He simply lifted the boy and carried him down the steps. That was when the town finally shouted. Not a cheer, a release. a sound like a held breath shattering. People poured out of doors and windows. A woman ran forward with a blanket. A man brought a canteen. The shopkeeper knelt and pressed water to the boy's lips. The stranger laid Taza gently on the blanket. The boy's eyes opened. He looked at the faces around him, then back at the stranger. He whispered something in Apache. The stranger didn't understand, but he nodded anyway. The stable hand appeared, breathless. "Mister, the path. There's a scout waiting. He says the cavalry is turning away. They saw the fire arrows and changed course." The stranger stood. He gathered the boy in his arms again, cradling him like something fragile. He started walking toward the stable, toward the path behind it. The town watched him go. No one tried to stop him. No one asked his name. The sky was fully light now. The sun broke over the ridge and spilled gold across the gallows, across the bodies, across the faces of the people who had finally found their courage. The stranger climbed the narrow trail. Behind him, the town was already beginning to clean up the mess. Ahead, the Apache scout stood beside a cluster of boulders, his spiral stick raised in greeting. And beyond him, in the far hills, a low rumble of hooves was beginning to build. The trail was steep and loose with shale. The stranger climbed it with the boy cradled against his chest, Taza's weight a fragile, fevered burden. The Apache scout met them at the boulders, his spiral stick catching the first pale light. He said nothing, only turned and led them higher. Behind them, the town was stirring. The stranger could hear doors opening, voices calling out. The jail door scraped open. Someone had found the keys. Sheriff Tom Weston stumbled into the street, blinking at the bodies, at the gallows, at the faces of the people who had finally decided to stop being afraid. He did not have to ask what happened. The gallows told the whole story. The stranger did not look back. The cabin sat in a shallow bowl of pines, hidden from the valley below. It was rough, 4 walls, a stone hearth, a single cot. The stranger had used it before, a place to rest between long rides. He laid Taza on the cot and covered him with a wool blanket. The boy's eyes fluttered but did not open. The scout built a small fire in the hearth, then took up his stick and stood watch at the door. The sky outside grew lighter. The stars faded one by one. Then the sound came. Not the cavalry, something deeper, older. A low rumble that grew and grew until the ground itself seemed to breathe. Hoofbeats, but not hurried. Steady, deliberate. The scout stepped outside and raised his spiral stick. The stranger walked to the door and looked out. They came through the pines like a tide. Warriors on horseback, their faces painted, their bodies wrapped in blankets and leather. Not a war party. Men, women, old ones, children riding double. 750 Apaches, moving as one, silent as the dawn itself. They filled the clearing and the slope beyond. They stopped in a wide circle around the cabin. No one raised a weapon. No one shouted. They just waited. A single rider dismounted. He was older, his hair streaked with silver, his shoulders straight. He wore a blanket woven in patterns of red and black. His face was lined, but his eyes were clear and calm. Chief Victorio. He walked toward the cabin alone. The stranger stepped outside to meet him. The 2 men stood facing each other in the cold morning light. Victorio looked at him for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice low and sure. "You saved my son. You did not ask who he was. You did not ask what it would cost you. You just did it." The stranger said nothing. His red bandana stirred in the wind. Victorio reached up and unpinned a brooch from his blanket, a silver circle with a turquoise stone. He pressed it into the stranger's hand. "You are not alone now," the chief said. "Wherever you ride, the Chiricahua ride with you. No enemy will touch you without facing us." The stranger looked down at the silver. He closed his fingers around it. Then he looked back at the cabin, where the boy lay breathing, still alive. He did not stay. He saddled his horse and swung up into the leather. The entire band watched, 750 motionless figures. The chief stepped back, but his gaze did not waver. The stranger turned his horse and rode slowly out of the clearing, the turquoise brooch tucked into his vest pocket. No one tried to stop him. No one called after him. They had already given what they came to give. He rode west toward the open plains, the sun rising behind him, the sound of the hooves of those who now claimed him as their own fading into the hills. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Your support is what brings these stories to more people.